Rockets and Knicks were in Game 5 when O.J. started that fateful drive. His four-way hazard lights were blinking, and no one knew what the Jews was thinking.
I've been to Reno, Chicago, Fargo, Minnesota, Buffalo, Toronto, Winslow, Sarasota, Wichita, Tulsa, Ottawa, Oklahoma, Tampa, Panama, Mattawa, La Paloma, Bangor, Baltimore, Salvador, Amarillo, Tocopilla, Barranquilla, and Padilla. I'm a killer. I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere, man. Crossed the desert bare, man. I breathe the mountain air, man. I've traveled, I've had my share, man. I've been everywhere.
This is Oversight Live, your advocate for good governance. We're putting the site back in. Oversight. Here's the watcher on the wall, your host, Ben Carpenter.
Good evening, Alaskans. Got to unmute myself there. Otherwise, you can see my mouth moving and can't hear me talking. Welcome to Oversight Live. I am Ben Carpenter. I'm your host for this evening. What is Oversight Live? Well, Alaska State Capitol and our legislature is only accessible by plane or by ferry. It's down in Juneau on the Panhandle. And that is, if you're looking at the screen right here, that's down here, right? Anyway, you can only get there by boat or by plane because there's no road. Well, that means for most Alaskans, it's prohibitively expensive, both time and money for us to get down there and see what's going on with our government, provide oversight, provide influence, that type of thing. So that's a challenge. But just because there's no road and that's a challenge for us doesn't mean that we can't provide oversight. We've got technology now. So all of our meetings that are going on down there, public meetings, are recorded and available for us. And so we don't really have much excuse to know what's going on, at least what the public is supposedly supposed to be seeing. Well, that's where I come in. So I've spent some time down in the legislature, spent 6 years down there as a member of the House, and I am going to bring you pertinent and relevant, timely content that I think you need to know about in order to provide oversight and be engaged with your government. So we're going to do that. We're going to bring some video clips, some conversations that are happening in the legislature for you to consume and understand. And if you don't, well, that's what we're here for. We're broadcasting on YouTube, X, and Facebook. And if you've got a question, just enter it right into the chat window there, and it'll get you, that question will come right to me. I will answer the question on air here during the broadcast as best I can. And if not, I'll work to find you an answer. If you're watching the recording and you have a question, then you can always hit me up on the email, producer@oversightlive.com. Ask your question. I'll do my best to get back in touch with you. If you've got a good question, there's probably a chance that there's others out there with the same question. I don't be surprised if I use it on air, because this whole program is meant to edify everyone and increase everyone's knowledge. So if you got a good question and there's a good answer, then I'm gonna use it. But don't be shy. There's no bad questions. The only bad question's one that doesn't get asked and doesn't get answered, because then it's no use to you or no use to anybody else. So that's the gist of the show. For now, we're focusing on the legislature. Maybe in the future we can focus on other meetings of other government agencies, but this is where we're focusing for right now. Tonight we're going to keep with the theme. We've got a very serious conversation going on and a very serious issue, which is this LNG pipeline, this natural gas pipeline from the North Slope that's being talked about. And the legislature's got a decision to make as to what their tax structure is going to be and whether they're actually going to support the project or not. They've already passed amendments to or it's basically a community substitute, but revised a resolution that came out of the House, the Senate did, that stripped out all reference to this particular project in favor of a more generic A project. Okay. So what that basically says to the world is we don't really care whether this particular project goes forward. We're in favor of a general project. Okay. So that kind of is telegraphing to me that maybe some members of the Senate are not too keen on this particular project. And then so if they're talking about taxation and what the right amount of taxation is going to be, then, you got to ask, what is the ulterior motive here if you don't particularly want this particular project? Well, what we're going to watch tonight is a meeting from today in Senate Resources. And there is a consultant that was first came to the legislature in 2019. My understanding, that was just a year before my time, but so it's not brand new to the legislature, but this contract is brand new as of January of this year. And this company called Pegasus is going to provide some insight. They've already had one meeting and provided some insight on, and their focus, they'll explain their focus, but their focus is basically on the risks of mega projects. Okay. So it's interesting that the legislature, as it's considering what its tax policy should be, that we're going to spend some time talking about the risks of mega projects and the risk of this project as if we're evaluating whether this project is even going to go forward or not, which is really just a belief problem. It's a question or lack of trust in the private company that's been asked to do this, Glenfarne. They now have ownership of the project, 75% ownership, and they're taking it forward. And we're gonna witness the Senate Resources Committee spend time tonight asking questions about feasibilities of projects, and that's the focus. Okay, which really means, are they questioning whether this project is even going to go forward? It's not, the question is not just about what's the right taxation, which you could understand that if you want to understand the project and the financials of the project and where the balance should be drawn, you could think that that's the line of questioning that you would expect. Whether the project is actually going to go forward or whether it's going to be successful, those are questions of doubt as to whether this project is the one that you're going to be successful at. Which then begs the question, what's the alternative? If Glenfarne is not able to do it, what's your alternative? Do you have another company that you would have in mind to build the pipeline, or do you have a totally different process, a totally different solution in mind, say importing LNG? And those are really the options that are on the table right now. If you don't build a pipeline, you got to go get gas in South Central Alaska, which is expensive. And it means expensive gas for Alaskans, or you're going to have to import LNG, which means it's going to be expensive gas for Alaskans. Those are your three alternatives right now with regard to natural gas. Build a pipeline, go dig some wells in Cook Inlet, or import it from Canada. That's it. That's your choices. So as we go through this process, we got to ask the question, do we believe the project is feasible and can move forward? And anyway, so we're gonna see what the legislature actually has, what their questions are here. So we're gonna get started with this right away, and the introductions will be made here momentarily.
On now to a presentation from Pegasus Global Holdings Incorporated. The presenters available today are Jeremy Clark, he's the Chief Operating Officer of Pegasus, and Joe Miller, President and CEO of Pegasus. Gentlemen, welcome, and thank you for joining us today. I will invite you to introduce yourselves and begin your presentation.
Yes, Joe Miller, President and CEO of Pegasus Global. I'll turn it over to Jeremy, who will be leading us through the presentation today.
Thank you, Joe. For the record, I'm Jeremy Clark, CEO of Pegasus Global. We previously presented to the legislature in January of this year, as well as last spring, and were initially engaged back in 2019 to review the risks of megaprojects. Today, our presentation continues to focus on megaproject risks, including specifically looking at distinctions between mega and giga projects, a couple of case studies from recent gas pipeline projects in the US, a discussion around the phased approach being implemented for the Alaska LNG project, and review of lessons learned from the TAPS project. We can go to the next slide, please. A quick definition.
Okay, just want to pause here and keep in mind that the bills that are before the legislature right now, and that's how the legislature expresses its power, is through passage of bills, modifying law, setting tax rates, eliminating taxes, all of that. That's all policy that the state government's going to implement, right? So the legislature's got to decide what the right policy is. So this presentation, you got to keep in mind that there's not a bill before the legislature that says we're going to do something in order to make a project more feasible, more viable, okay? Less risky. There's not a bill that's before us, okay? Passing one of the bills might have the effect of doing that, making it more or less risky, but that's not the focus or the purpose of the bill. The purpose of the bill is to modify tax regime for a particular purpose. So you've got Senate Bill 280, which was the governor's bill that is eliminating property tax as the taxing structure and putting in a volumetric tax as a taxing structure. And that is because the project sponsors see that as a better means for making the project happen. And then you've got Senate Bill 275, which is Kathy Giesel's bill, that is doubling down on the existing tax structure and not modifying it in the least to help make the project move forward. It is backwards looking to where the project used to be and not really focused on this particular project, okay? Senate Bill 280 focused on this project. 275 focused on the past and what the Senate Resources Committee thinks that projects ought to be or taxation ought to be for projects, okay? So the whole point of this meeting is in question in my mind. Why consider, if you're going to consider the risks of the project, how does that influence your decisions on the taxes of the project? Is it to help reduce the risks so the project can go forward, or are you still trying to determine whether the project is even going to be feasible? Which is really a belief problem, because you've got Glenfarne that's telling you that it is feasible and they need this bill in order to make the final steps possible and reach an FID, a final investment decision. Okay. So what is the driving force behind the conversation here tonight? Is it helping us get to a solution on Senate Bill 280 and answering the question as to whether we need to accommodate the private entity that's going to build the pipeline? Or is it a totally different concept, which is we don't even believe the pipeline can be built? I think that's probably what is actually going on here.
Of mega projects, I'm sure all of you are now well familiar with. In essence, they are extremely large and complex projects with many complexities and interfaces. Typically over $1 billion, multi-year planning, multi-year construction, many stakeholders. That is kind of the facets of the complexity there. Jump to the next slide if there's no questions.
No questions.
Perfect. So now looking at mega projects to giga projects, in the simplest terms, a giga project is a very large mega project. What this means in practice typically is a project with such scale that they can be transformational for the region, which can mean new energy systems, new economies, even entirely new cities being built. And with that scale, of course, the complexity and risks also increase. You can see we've kind of had some quick highlights of the cost, scale, risks, et cetera, of the kind of distinction between mega and giga. But again, the giga is really just a larger, more complex version of a mega project.
I see no
And
question.
if there's
No questions.
all right. Thank you.
A strategic, if we go back, it said a strategic transformation by the sponsor. That's an interesting statement. From what we've seen thus far in Senate Finance, the strategic transformation is focused on how much more money can we get for the state coffers versus a strategic transformation of our private economy. What would this do for our private economy? Are there going to be questions tonight of this consultant? How would this benefit, if this is a risky project, what are the benefits for the private economy? Like risk versus reward. Are we going to hear those questions?
Thank you. Next slide there. So the challenges with giga projects are really common with the mega project challenges. The iron law that Bent Flyberg has penned, that over budget, over time, under benefits over and over again, is very relevant to both mega and giga projects. With their large size and complexity, they face many challenges beyond typical projects. One of the overarching drivers to the challenges is just that long timeline from initiation through planning and execution to the final delivery of the project. Of course, with the Alaska LNG project, everyone's aware that it started really in earnest with the creation of AGDC in 2014. 12 years later, now we're just nearing the FID of the project. So these extended timelines, beyond just leading to the higher risk exposure, also open them up to increased likelihood for black swan type events outside the normal risk management practices, like a COVID-19 type event. And then with the giga projects, the scale just means those impacts also have a higher degree of impact. A quick example would be a $5 billion project with a 1% cost increase would equate to a $50 million impact, while a 1% cost increase on a $25 billion project is a $250 million impact. So the scale just rises with everything on a giga project. Now, despite these challenges, completed mega and giga projects still generally provide their intended benefits, even if at a higher cost than planned. We were part of a team that reviewed the prudency of the Georgia Vogtle nuclear power plant. This project had a slew of challenges, from being executed during COVID-19, the bankruptcy of key project partners, the first deployment of advanced reactor technologies in the US, and more. Cost rose from nearly $14 billion to final cost of over $36 billion, as well as taking 7 years longer than planned to complete. However, despite all that, it now provides reliable energy to over 2 million homes and will operate for another 60 to 80 years. Jumping ahead, if there's no questions there.
Senator Kawasaki had a question.
Thanks. And I guess this goes
Sure.
back to the prior slide, but would you consider this AK LNG one giga project, one medium-sized giga project, or 3 independent small giga projects?
Thank you, Senator Kawasaki. That's a very good question. From our perspective, we would treat the overall program as a giga program, essentially. And then the 3 main components, the pipeline, the treatment plant, and the terminal, those are kind of right on the threshold between a mega and giga project. You could call it either way for most of them, but I think the key distinction is the overall program would certainly be a giga program.
Is there really a fundamental difference on the label that you put on this, whether you call it a mega project or a giga project, or whether the overall project that's sitting before us with Glenfarne fits into the mold that these consultants are putting forward, as to whether you call it a mega or a giga? I mean, just think about the machinations that are going around in somebody's head right now as they're sitting there like, is this project a mega project or a giga project? It's got 3 different phases. Is each one of the phase a mega project or a giga project? I just think about that as being a really small-minded worry. Why does it care? Why does it matter? You've got a risk assessment. I guess you got to put a label on something, but does it really matter? Like, it doesn't matter. It does not matter whether it's called a mega project or a giga project, or if there's 3 mega and 1 giga. It doesn't matter. It's just like, this is small potatoes.
Follow up, Senator Kawasaki.
Yeah, and I know you're going to, I see there's a slide just a couple ahead, but I guess the underpinnings of the economics are based on exporting LNG. And so even if we had a pipeline, that's not going to help anybody. And even if we had a gas treatment plant, that won't help anybody. It's really the LNG export facility at the terminus that is the big project.
So I'm hoping somebody in Fairbanks is paying attention. If we had a pipeline only and it terminated across in Beluga, it doesn't make it to an LNG export facility in Nikiski, but it brings gas to South Central Alaska, and a spur line could be built to Fairbanks. That doesn't really benefit anybody. I think that benefits everybody. Everybody that's on the rail belt. It means that we would have a consistent source of gas for 50, 60 plus years. It means there would be an incentive for people to want to go find more gas on the North Slope. It means companies and businesses, mines, could tap into that source of gas and reduce the cost of their alternative energy if the cost of the gas is lower than other alternatives, right? At least the gas would be present. Whether it's expensive or not remains to be seen, but at least you would have it. You wouldn't have this conversation that's, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Cook inlet gas is going to run out. You wouldn't have to import it. You would have a consistent supply. And so that doesn't benefit anybody if we just built the pipeline. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't want to just see the pipeline get built, because that means higher cost gas for us. It means the upper limit of gas price is right at the same of what it would cost to import it, because we wouldn't build a pipeline and supply gas to us for more than what it would cost to import it. Okay. So that's the upper limit. I want to see cheaper gas, which means you got to build an export facility, and that drives the cost down. All right. But don't mislead yourself to think that if you just got the pipeline and nothing else, that wouldn't be a benefit. We would have gas to portions of Alaska that don't have consistent supply of gas right now, namely Fairbanks guy who represents Fairbanks.
Yes, Senator Kawasaki, that would be certainly the revenue driver of the project.
Okay.
Senator Klayman.
Waves his
I
hands like
decided at the last minute. So I've been reading the Flyberg book. I mean, he may have more than one, but I've been reading one of them over the last few weeks. And one of the topics he says is you have to think of these projects not going from left to right, but from right to left. And if we're looking at these, the whole pipeline project with the 3 components, if we're looking at the end product, what is the picture that it is on the right from your perspective?
Senator Klayman, I'm not specifically familiar with that exact passage from Flyberg, but I imagine he's getting at, you want to define what the end product looks like and kind of the parameters around that and work backwards from that. So
yes,
for the state of Alaska, it's providing that in-state supply, which the pipeline would achieve, and having that revenue generated from the in-state resource, which the terminal would provide. There's obviously a slew of specific details and interfaces that go along with that.
Follow up, Senator Klayman.
not at this point. Thank you.
All right. I see no further questions. We can move on.
I'm glad we know that.
All right. Here we summarize the scope and issues associated with 2 recent natural gas line projects that were executed in the United States. And I'll turn it over to Joe to add some discussion to that.
Just for the
Sure,
public.
thank you. Again, Joe Miller for the record.
Just for the public who are listening, we're on slide pipeline case studies. The slides are not numbered, but that's the title on the slide we're on.
Thank you for that.
Yes, I live near Charlotte, Carolina, and these were a couple pipelines that I followed pretty closely. And I spent quite a bit of time working for an electric and gas utility that was a partner in the Atlantic Coast Pipeline specifically. In the Southeast and Mid-Atlantic and really Northeast, historically much of the natural gas has come from the Transco pipeline, which currently transports gas from the Gulf to those regions. That pipeline had become completely full with increased demand over the years. And so there were many utilities scrambling to find additional gas. The Northern Appalachian gas region developed based on advances in horizontal drilling and fracturing. However, there were not pipelines to get that to market. So these were a couple of very important pipelines that were attempting to do that. And I just wanted to go over briefly their history. You can see the Mountain Valley Pipeline, about 300-mile pipeline, initially estimated at $3.5 billion, ended up at $9.6 billion. Construction commenced in 2018 and ended up coming into service in June of 2024. And the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, 600-mile pipeline from Virginia to the very bottom of North Carolina, was a 1.5 billion BCF per day pipeline, initially estimated to be $4.5 billion, and its last estimate ended up at 8+ billion. Construction commenced in 2018, and the project was canceled in 2020. And at that point, had about a 3.5-year delay. On that pipeline, there was not a formal communication on the amount of costs that had been incurred, but many put that cost north of $3 billion.
I'm not sure whether we're going to get more information here. I forgot, but look at the issues and legal challenges here. Legal and permitting challenges and regulatory uncertainty. I'm assuming that is, since the project got canceled. I'm not sure, but is that why the project got canceled? Permitting challenges are probably already taken care of if you were already building the pipeline. Was there legal challenges to it that has delayed the project or stopped it once it got commenced? I'm not sure. You had, for this other pipeline that did get built, there were legal and permitting challenges as well. So both pipelines have legal and permitting challenges. This Alaska pipeline has had legal and permitting challenges, and we've gotten through that piece of it, right? Challenging terrain. We have challenging terrain. Regulatory uncertainty. I mean, that's what we're discussing right now, is how is the state going to regulate this pipeline? So are we taking away from this conversation, is the legislature, these legislators in the Resources Committee, taking away that their actions need to bring certainty to getting this pipeline done, this project done, to help with making it possible? Is that, or are we going to go the SB 275 route and provide more regulatory control?
And so I just mentioned these as examples as you're considering taxation and you're considering gas supply for the state. And I might add that the Mountain Valley Pipeline, it did get completed, and it is providing a very significant, meaningful source of gas, lower cost gas, I might add as well, to the region.
Atlantic Coast Pipeline got canceled July of 2020. What else is happening in 2020? July of 2020. COVID just coming on big. Green New Deal just coming on big. I wonder, it would be interesting. I mean, since the presenters are bringing this up as a case in point of what we should study, it is relevant to asking the questions why it actually got canceled, since there will be parallel connections drawn to the possibility that the LNG, aka LNG pipeline, could get canceled. So why could this get canceled at this point? Why would our project get canceled because this Atlantic Coast pipeline got canceled? I mean, we're talking two different regulatory or two different time frames, right? Green New Deal and gas and oil development are bad, and now we're into a Trump administration where that's not the case anymore. But what happens if Trump gets replaced by a liberal Democrat, who then can they stop the project? At least they're like, no, gas is bad. We're not doing projects anymore. We're going to shut that down. Build some wind and some solar, because that's what you need. I mean, it's a legitimate question that needs to be answered.
But both of these suffered from cycles of agencies issuing permits, opposition challenging those permits, courts vacating those permits. The agency then reissues the permit, and then another lawsuit is filed. But both of them suffered from that significantly, and was a primary contributor to the demise of the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. Mountain Valley Pipeline was over 90% complete and hung up on permits. There were many that thought that it was not going to ever get completed, even though it was 90% complete. And the primary reason it did get completed is Senator Manchin agreed to the Inflation Reduction Act, and one of the things he got in exchange was the ability to complete Mountain Valley Pipeline. And so I just wanted to go over those two examples.
So Mountain Valley Pipeline literally required an act of Congress to get it fully permitted and get through. That's what he just told us. Senator Manchin was able to swing a deal, probably in a budget document that, or maybe not a budget, but it's some sort of legislative action where he was able to get the permitting done. Our pipeline is fully permitted. This, to the best of my understanding, is not an issue for the Alaska LNG project. And that is what Glenfarne has spoken on multiple times. They're like, normally you come into a project like either of these two examples, and the permitting is the thing that increases the risk and cost the most. And this Alaska project's already permitted. So that risk is very low at this point.
I think, the points are that the pipelines can take longer than originally expected. They can start and not finish. And I think those two things are important relative to considering taxation treatment.
Craig's asking a really good question. We need to pause here for just a second. Craig says, Ben, do you think the committee reviews and potentially has input into the presentation in advance of the meeting? Yes, in the sense that Chair Giesel gave the marching orders for the consultant on what they should focus their energies on. So she presented questions to them, or presented areas where she wanted their expertise to be provided. Probably, if you go back to the beginning of the presentation and they said, here's the agenda, these are the topics that we're going to cover, those topics were agreed upon prior to this briefing. Prior to them coming with a presentation, there was a behind the scenes conversation that said, yeah, this is what we want you to focus on. Okay. Because again, the chair is going to have a goal for what the presenter information is going to lead the committee and the legislature to, right? And that action is legislative action or inaction, for example. So yes, 100%. There was input. Now, is Chair Giesel or somebody there going through the slides and telling them to change what they've got in the slides? No, that's not happening. They're going to trust the consultant to come back. Now, I guess if the consultant came back and they previewed the slides ahead of time, which is likely, and they had significant questions, they may pose those questions before you actually have the meeting. But I don't think that the committee is it's unlikely that they're actually second guessing the information that's on the slides, but they did provide information to guide the conversation as to where they want it to go, what topics they want to discuss. Good question.
We've heard a lot of discussion related to the impacts of municipalities and those costs not getting recovered until later. And we just want to point out that construction can take much longer than expected, and those impacts can last for longer. There can be a scenario where those construction impacts are felt and the project does not get completed. Again, also considerations in terms of meeting gas supply needs. Mega projects can take quite a bit longer than expected. And we had the opportunity to meet with John Sims, and of course, the reliability of options is front and center in his mind.
So what is, if we're talking about the correct tax rate for a pipeline project, we're answering the mail on the request to adjust our tax rate. What does the value of this particular conversation have to that conversation, to that action that must be taken? He's talking with John Sims. Everybody know who John Sims is? John Sims is not sitting at this table. John Sims is the leader of NSTAR. And John Sims, he's telling us, John Sims is telling him, well, it's the reliability piece of this. I don't really care whether it's imported LNG or whether it's a pipeline. I need reliability. So if I can get my imported LNG into a import terminal, and that takes fewer permits, it takes less time, it's less costly, and all of that can get done, and there's less risk involved with that project, then I would rather do that than do this over here that has more risk and takes more time and is more costly. Okay. I'm just speculating here, right? So John Sims from NSTAR is looking at the two options and saying, well, I just want reliable gas. Which one's going to get me reliable gas the soonest? Because I've got these contracts that I'm supposed to fill, NSTAR's contracts to Alaskans, that they're having a challenge filling in the short term. And I guess in the long term, because what's the long-term solution here? We don't have one other than cook inlet gas, importation of LNG or a pipeline. So, but the point, I'm getting down this rabbit hole. The point is the committee right now, through their consultant, is having a consideration about risk and feasibility of a pipeline. But you already have a private entity that says they're going to build it. They just need the taxes to be adjusted. So how does this conversation get you further to a warm fuzzy on what the right tax regime is? It seems like we're not even having that conversation. The information we're getting here is not helping us further the conversation about a taxing regime. It's whether we trust that a pipeline can even be built, and maybe we should go with an import strategy as opposed to a pipeline.
As well. Any questions on this slide?
Yes, Senator Myers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Mr. Miller, with that Atlantic Coast pipeline, you said it began construction, but then it was canceled midway through. I'm curious as to what happened, excuse me, with what was already in the ground. Did somebody have to go pull it back up? Was it left there? Has it been sold off to another developer who might consider completing it at a later date? What's going on there?
That's a very good question, and I'm not certain of that. If they had reclamation funding that allowed them to bring that back to original condition, I'm not certain. I've not heard of that pipe being reclaimed, so I just can't answer your question. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Kawasaki.
Yeah, thank you for being online. I just had a question about the two pipelines. Were these pipelines at final investment decision knowing what the gas at the terminus was going to cost or was going to sell for? And where was the terminus? Was it a facility? It wasn't an export facility. it sounds like it was to meet demands.
I believe the terminus for the Mountain Valley pipeline was into the Transco pipeline that I spoke about earlier.
Okay.
In Virginia. The terminus for the Atlantic Coast Pipeline was at the very southern border of North Carolina, very close to the South Carolina border. If that helps.
Does.
Follow
And
up,
then
Senator Kosaki.
to follow up, were they, I mean, it sounds like, were they already fully subscribed when the companies that built Atlantic Coast Pipeline decided to commit?
Yes, I believe, in my previous employer, Duke Energy, was a part owner in that pipeline, but probably as important was a co-anchor shipper for that pipeline as well. I believe both pipelines were largely subscribed.
Thank you.
I believe over 70 to 80% subscribed.
Senator Wielechowski.
Thank you. You have the two pipelines here. You have initially estimated, and I'm curious when it was initially estimated, how far along in the process was that? Was that the FID initial estimate, or was that FEED estimate? How far along in the process was that? Are you basing those estimates?
That is a good question. Jeremy, do you recall that?
I'm not sure if it was this is Jeremy Clark for the record. I'm not sure that it was specifically detailed in the records that we reviewed, but my assumption would be that was the initial estimate would have been probably at the FID phase in this case.
Follow up, Senator Wielechowski.
Subject to check.
And just comparing the issues, it seems that there were permitting issues, there was regulatory uncertainty, and I think by and large, the permits are issued for our gas line. I don't think there is regulatory. Well, there's some question about whether the RCA applies or not. But it seems like probably one of the bigger issues is the permitting, which we have the permits here. And so I'm curious, trying to do an apples to apples comparison on where we are versus where these are. Maybe you can give us your input on that.
Sure, and a good point. Again, Joe Miller for the record. And one of the reasons we presented these is they had federal permits prior to construction. These challenges occurred, many of the challenges occurred after construction. And so those challenges related to questioning the analysis that underpinned the issuance of those permits, but also claims of construction not abiding to the permits. If that helps.
Follow up, Senator Wielechowski.
So the construction was completed and they wouldn't let them start flowing gas through the project? Is that your
No, so when construction completed, some of the opposition attained information relative to those construction practices and challenged whether or not that construction, while it was ongoing, was complying with the permit requirements, if that helps.
Follow up.
So in addition to the construction issues, they were also questioning and challenging the analysis that the permitting agency conducted ahead of issuing those permits.
Okay.
Senator Wielechowski.
That's interesting. And my thought process all along, and I think many people's, is that, well, we have the permits and we're not really exposed to those problems. But you're saying that there still could be, after construction, there still could be challenges?
Yeah, the people that are on his side of the political fence are going to find any means to try to stop projects like this. like these are his friends.
Yes, that is one of the important issues why we included this slide and wanted to review these with you. It is significant that this project does have federal permits in many.
And one of the reasons that Glenfarne and AGDC have come up on the net I need to make myself big here because you need to see this, see my face here. One of the reasons that they've come up on the net with their Senate Bill 280 saying that we need to move to a volumetric tax is to avoid this litigation issue. Maybe not with how the construction has gone, but with regard to how the taxation is going to go forward, the valuation of their property within the property tax regime. Okay. So de-risking the project is trying to prevent the lawsuits that tie up projects and lawyers and cost and money and increase the total cost of the project, right? Cost overruns are not just because you can't get the steel in time or the welds went wrong and now you got to redo it, right? Those are not the only thing that increases the cost overruns. The additional legislation, but litigation, it also costs more, right? And so the good manager says, I've got a permit, and the permit, it allows me to do X, Y, and Z. And so I'm going to stick with X, Y, and Z because that's what's in the permit. And if I stray from the permit, if I dabble in the gray areas, then I might get sued. And so if I want to manage the project for the risk side of it, then I'm going to ask for a variance instead of just doing it. Right. And so, I mean, I guess you can't always prevent another entity from coming in and trying to file a lawsuit against you on some perceived slight, but the good manager manages the project within the scope of the permit so that lawsuit gets thrown out and it reduces or minimizes the cost spent on that activity, right? The legislature has the opportunity right now because the project would have no control over the lawsuits over the valuation of capital of property, right? That's all something that the administration is going to create that problem by doing the evaluations, right? And so the best thing that the state could do now is alleviate or prevent that problem from even being possible in the future by shifting the tax regime to a volumetric tax that totally discounts the whole concept of evaluation of property and any potential lawsuits. And that's what's been presented to this committee, both from a consultant perspective of what it would do and from the producer, the Glen Farm, the entity that's going to build the pipeline. So that's what's before the committee here is how to reduce risk.
Any state permits. Those are not easy, take a lot of engineering, a lot of work. And so that is significant, but we just want to make the point that does not mean that challenges are over. Don't know that this project would receive the type of challenges these two did, but it is possible. And one of them got through those challenges and is providing great benefit. I'll make sure that's clear.
Senator Wielechowski.
And I'm just trying to figure out how a pipeline company deals with the situation where they initially they buy their gas, they have gas contracts, they estimated it to be $3.5 billion. It turns out to be $9.6 billion. Like, how does that project? How does that project deal with the economics of that? It seems like it just blows the economics to pieces. How does that stay financially viable at that point?
You know, it's I've seen economic modeling of large projects before, and I've seen sensitivities performed based on changes to the ultimate construction cost, and it just depends. You know, it depends on the contracts that exist with in this case, LNG off-takers or their contractors or gas producers. You know, as some of that capital cost overrun risk shifted to some of those other entities. It depends on the ROE that they begin with. You know, does it leave room for some capital cost overrun? So projects that do come in twice what are expected can still earn a level of return for owners. Granted, maybe not what it was originally planned to be, but still can earn return.
Senator Dunbar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I unfortunately have to step out, but I wanted to ask one question before I go. And I apologize if this is later in the slides, but we're in sort of a unique position where we have a state corporation, AGDC, that is invested in this project, not sort of literally at this point, a co-owner of 8-Star. And a couple of days ago, someone from that organization was speaking to us about their cost estimates, and there was some challenge about 46 billion, 53, 57 billion, and they spoke about how they're going to get a new cost estimate soon. And I apologize if I use a terminology wrong. It was either type 2 or level 2. What was that?
Class 2.
Class 2. Thank you, Madam Chair. So class 2 estimates, and then that would bring the band of possible outlays down to about 15%, I think. That they could get into that zone where they're certain that it would be within 15%. How certain are you that once we get that class 2 estimate, that 15% is the upper limit of possible cost overruns?
Jeremy, do you want to take that?
Sure.
You can see that a committee of people that don't have never and don't on a regular basis or even once in their lifetime manage or do mega projects are trying to wrap their brain around things, and they've got the responsibility to make decisions here, right? And so they default to their comfort level. You see Kawasaki asking questions, and it's defaulting to his level of thinking, right? Is this a mega project or is this a giga project? I really am not entirely sure here. What would you consider it? 3 projects that are mega or one? I mean, we've got people who do mega projects, giga project, whatever, they do big projects for a living, and they're coming to the legislature and they're saying, hey, if you want this pipeline built, we need you to consider redoing your tax structure here. You're still going to make tax. You're still going to get tax revenue. It's going to be somewhere in the consideration of $800 million a year. Okay. Still a large sum of money, but it's not a property tax. It's a volumetric tax. And you would think that they're asking you to pull your hair out and walk down the road with no hair because you're going to say yes to a change to what you have. Right. And these people sitting at the table are trying to wrap their brain around what it takes to build a project. When you've got a contractor, a contractor who's already on board to build the pipeline, and you're coming at this from an approach that says, well, we don't really trust you. We don't really trust what you're saying. So we're going to have a consultant come in here and explain to us why this is a good deal. Why this company knows what they're talking about. They don't even know whether the consultant's blowing smoke up their skirt. How would they know? They're going to trust the consultant, but they won't trust the company. Like they don't have the subject matter expertise to know one way or the other. Bring the consultant in, ask the consultant questions, and you discount them like they don't know what they're talking about. But you pay $250,000 to have a consultant come in here and tell you something, and now you believe it?
Thank you, Senator Dunbar. The Jeremy Clark for the record here. So the Class 2 estimate refers to the AACE International, which is kind of the industry standard for a lot of project control related efforts, including cost estimation and schedule development and everything related to that. They have a kind of graduating scale where as you kind of refine your estimate, you build up from a class 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And the idea is that as you gain more detail on the project, as it gets more developed, more refined, your confidence in the estimate increases because you have that greater data and greater certainty. They also do prescribe those suggested estimate accuracy ranges for the different classes of estimate. with those estimate accuracy ranges, the key qualifier is really the quality of the estimate itself. What were the inputs? What were the assumptions? What type of risk exercises were modeled to look at, the potential impacts to the project? So with a higher risk project, you're more likely to have pressure against those upper bounds than you would on a lower risk project. And again, it's all related to the estimate inputs and the quality of the estimate that's going to really define that ultimate accuracy range.
Follow, Madam Chair.
Senator Dunbar.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. So just before I go, would you consider this a high risk project? And can you give me some kind of metric, a letter grade, a percentage, something where you can help us conceptualize what the likelihood is that 15% upper limit holds after that class 2 estimate?
How does the answer to that question help you determine what the right taxation is? If it is considered a high risk project, does that mean you would consider what Senate Bill 280 is asking and say, okay, well, that makes sense because this is a high risk project? If he comes back and he says, no, this looks like, you got all your permits and this project looks like it's probably a medium risk, maybe even a low risk project, which is, I don't expect him to say that. But if he did, would you come back and say, okay, well, then I think we'll just go ahead and keep our tax regime? Like, what is the thinking here that helps you answer the question that's before you? Whether you want to change the tax regime and allow the project to move forward with the asks that the administration and the project developer are asking for, or you're going to do something different. How does this line of questioning get you to answer that question? Or are you trying to find an excuse for why you should not support this project at all? Because it's too high risk. It's never going to get built. It's going to have cost overruns. It's going to fail. We're going to pipe in the ground and it's never going to get built. And we're fear, scare. I've got ulterior motives. Let's not do this. Let's do the other thing that I really want to do.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. I would say this is certainly a risky project. We've highlighted the risks associated with mega and giga projects. All those would definitely apply here. You have, the Arctic terrain that you're crossing with the pipeline that has its own slew of challenges associated with it. Relative to being within that upper bounds of the estimated the accuracy range for the estimate, it would really, it'd be hard pressed to make an opinion on it without having really kind of insight into their types of risks that they've modeled and the assumptions that they used into the estimate.
Follow-up, Senator Dunbar.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. I think we are in a similar seat as you, and we look forward to seeing that Class 2 estimate. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Dunbar. Senator Myers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, sitting in Alaska, we've got two projects to compare. We've got TAPS, and then we've got the current project before us. TAPS, wildly over budget, as everybody knows, but the oil companies were willing to accept that over budget because they weren't making money off of the pipeline. They were making money off of the sale of the oil itself. Whereas the current project developer separate from the producers, so they're going to be a lot more risk averse, I guess, when it comes to the capital cost overruns. So what were, of the two that we've got in front of us here, Mountain Valley and Atlantic Coast, what were the ownership structures there? Are we talking developer, producer, something different?
Atlantic Coast Pipeline, really shippers, I would say. Electric and gas utilities.
Oh, okay.
Were the primary owners on that. Mountain Valley Pipeline, Equitran was an owner, and NextEra was an owner. And so I would say that were midstream companies, if that's helpful.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, thank you.
And that speaker was Mr. Miller. Further questions on
Yes, thank you.
on the slide pipeline case studies? Senator Kawasaki.
Yeah, this is really interesting because you know, we've been sort of told, and I just assume it's concluded that we have these permits in hand and that there won't be any sort of potential for litigation. And I guess I was just Googling the Atlantic Coast Pipeline and some of the litigation that followed, including some of the, well, it looks like there were parts of it that didn't, that were going to cross an area disproportionately impacting Native Americans. It only proposed, located 1 mile from the proposed route. And the percent of Native Americans in that area was only 13% of the base population and only 1% of the total state's population. That was part that led to eventually the courts, the Fourth Circuit going all the way.
What does this have to do with our pipeline? What does it have to do with the problem that you have to solve right now, which is what do we do with our tax regime? It sounds like you're either taking a history course right now, or you're delaying and you're just taking up time to say, hey, look, we do our due diligence. We talked about pipelines. Or you're looking for an excuse to say that this pipeline is going to have costs and therefore this isn't the right thing to do. So we don't even need to take up the tax conversation because it's not the right thing to do. We really just need to import gas. I mean, the folks in Fairbanks, to Rick's point here, tankers of gas, tankers of LNG to South Central Alaska doesn't help Fairbanks. Only a pipeline helps Fairbanks. So what are you doing, Fairbanksians? You ought to be calling this guy and saying, what the hell are your line of questions for? What are you thinking, Senator Kawasaki? Are you worried that the project is going to have overruns? It might. Is it going to have overruns because of a taxation problem, like a property tax valuation problem? Well, you can prevent that. You can just eliminate the property tax altogether and go to a volumetric tax, and then you've helped the project avoid that hurdle. And then the interior of Alaska can have a pipeline built. Instead, this entire effort that we're witnessing right now looks to be either a delay or focusing in the wrong direction, like trying to justify why this pipeline can't happen, or what is all the risks about why this pipeline can't happen.
Way. There was also brought before the courts the exaggerated claim of job creations in West Virginia, brought up as part of why the project wasn't necessary. And when finally just the volumes weren't proved out to be necessary for the project to have been sanctioned. And so it looks like it went to the Court of Appeals where they ruled in favor of the groups. And I'm just curious, because again, I'm sort of foregone conclusion, we've got the permits in hand, so we're good. But this like kind of freaks me out a little bit that, you know, it could still come to haunt us if we don't have enough jobs that we said we were going to do, or we don't have the volumes that we expected we're going to have.
Before you respond to that, could I ask anyone who's online listening in to please mute themselves? We're getting a little background noise. Mr. Miller or Mr. Clark?
Well, I would just, I think, you know, permit durability is important. I think that's the point we want to make. Durability in terms of, can it stand the test, a legal test, in terms of the foundation of that permit being issued.
And needless to say here, but maybe it just needs to be said, liberal activist judges that don't just squash frivolent lawsuits, which are the left side of this political spectrum is majority represented at this table? Like, your whole line of thinking with your political persuasion is part of the problem as to why we have litigation problems with projects that would benefit economies.
Pipelines get permitted, pipelines get completed. There were very significant challenges on these two. So I don't know the level of rigor behind the permitting. I don't know what kind of challenges could be awaiting this project, but certainly it's possible. I will say these got tremendous challenge at every turn.
Thank you.
Thank you. I will comment that we did find a 2020 EIS that was issued to FERC. It's about 200 pages long. Very interesting to read the recognition of the impacts to the local areas, air quality, caribou movement on the North Slope, traffic, interesting contents, probably pretty typical EIS. But
I would share that we have someone on our team that has 40 years of pipelining experience and led a team of pipeline project managers, and he reviewed that EIS for this project and was complimentary of the amount of engineering that went into that. And so we know additional engineering continues, but I just wanted to pass that along.
thank you. That's really helpful to know.
Is this a committee meeting for a warm fuzzy on our pipeline permitting, or are we figuring out whether we want to modify our taxation structure? Like, what is it that these people are actually attempting to do right now? They're not talking about taxation. They're talking about whether this pipeline's feasible.
I would pause here and just see if perhaps Senator Rauscher, who's online, might have a question. If the LIO could unmute him and find out. Senator Rauscher, do you have a question?
My questions were asked and answered by Senator Wolakowski. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I think we're ready to move on to this, the slide that is titled Phased Approach Introduction.
Sure, thank you. And this is Jeremy Clark again for the record.
Okay, phased approach. So we're now going to hear the consultant's opinion about the phased approach that Glenfarne is taking. Phased approach is not something that I think the members here are in favor of. And now they want to know what the consultants have to say about phased approach, right? What are the risks? So how does that help us get to a conversation about the right tax structure? Or are we still focused on whether we want to support this project or not, right? What is the point? If Glenfarne says they can do it and they're going to do it in a phased approach, is the state going to come to them and say, yeah, well, you know, we're not really fans of a phased approach. So we're going to tell you by law that you can't take a phased approach. You're going to have to go find financing the way we want you to do. You see what I'm saying? What is the thing that the legislature is going to do with this information? You're going to go to the private company and say you're running this all wrong. Our consultant told us that this is going to be a risky way of doing it.
So we're taking now a look. This is just to introduce the phased approach discussion for the Alaska LNG project. And you can see from the AGDC quotes on this slide that the intent of the phased approach was to quickly provide gas to Alaskans, reduce project risk, and increase the outlook for the LNG export investment. Under this phased approach, the pipeline execution would start ahead of the gas treatment plant and LNG terminal. Based on information from AGDC, it suggested the phased approach could deliver first gas roughly 2 to 3 years earlier than the full program approach. We note that, when they introduced this, they were targeting first gas in 2029. So presumably that has been pushed out along with, everything that has kind of shifted since then. there are no questions, we can jump into the next slide. We continue the phased approach discussion.
See no questions.
All right, so some considerations around this phased approach. Any strategic change, like splitting the project into phases, will influence the risk profile of a project, ideally lowering the overall risk, but certainly changing the risks, which may involve some existing risks being mitigated, as well as some new risks that may emerge as a result. As AGDC recognized, the phased approach does reduce the initial capital for the project and provides earlier in-state gas delivery, but it does also introduce structural risks as the economics of the pipeline are tied to the LNG export revenue. So if phase 2 is delayed, it would further increase that risk. And on the execution side, essentially the same risk exists for the pipeline, whether it's delivered on a phased approach or not. It's the same technical requirements, same terrain, same labor requirements. There's a potential that doing the phased approach would reduce the overall labor burden to the project by kind of staggering it. But that also, it does introduce waves of resource-related efforts. We'd have multiple waves of logistics, labor camps, community impacts, et cetera. And then the potential for a longer overall duration as well. Any questions on this slide here?
Senator Clayman.
I think this is I'd say this, well, it's a follow-up on my earlier question about what's the end plan. And if you're going with the 3 phases, any delays in phase 1, any delays in phase 2 make the completion of phase 3 get further and further away. And if that's the financial reward at the end, doesn't having those phases actually make it even more complicated with the mega project risks because they're the 3 phases than you would have if you only had one project and you could get to the end of phase 3 more rapidly?
So what is the right taxation rate for a project like this? That's the question you really wanted to ask, right?
Senator Clayman, yeah, that is something Joe and I discussed while we were reviewing and preparing for this slide. There's a number of trade-offs on this approach. It's impossible to say.
Is the approach for building the pipeline up for discussion? Is the legislature considering the approach, how the pipeline is being constructed by Glenfarne? Is that up for discussion? Is that part of SB 275 or SB 280? Is there any effort in the legislature that's discussing how the pipeline should be built? If any of this conversation has anything to do with what the correct taxation rate is, somebody let me know.
Ahead of time, which one is more advantageous. Doing the pipeline first, as AGDC recognized, reduces the capital investment up front, but it does introduce those risks if the later phases of the project are delayed or possibly not even started because of the staggered FIDs that these phases also have. So there's a number of trade-offs involved. It's the ultimate answer.
And that was Jeremy Clark responding to that question. Did you have a follow-up, Senator Clayman?
I did. So again, in the kind of the mega project analysis, let's assume a scenario in which phase 1 gets completed, but then for whatever reason, they don't go forward on phase 2 or phase 3, or they get started, but problems arise and they stop both of them. Is phase 1 now completed even? Does it become viable for anything, or does it become a complete loss?
This is Joe Miller. I would say that's an interesting scenario. It appears that splitting them in this manner and starting one early could lead to just phase 1 getting completed. The export facility and the gas treatment plant are very large, complex projects on their own. One question we have is phase one financeable on a standalone basis? Can you kick off construction of phase one without having the overall program financing in place? And I thought there was interesting information provided by Dan Stickle, Department of Revenue, where he has done a level of analysis and related to phase one in-state gas supply cost and put that on the order of $12 to $13. I was encouraged to hear that kind of number relative to the cost of alternatives, primarily LNG importing. It was good to hear it was generally on par with that. I wondered what kind of volumes that was anticipating. That price has everything to do with volumes. But I think I'd also heard in, I don't know if it was from AGDC or Glenfarne, that for phase one, there might be some pushing out of phase one costs in terms of their amortization so that those costs more align with the LNG off-takers, since that overbuild relative to the in-state needs was more tied to them. But if, the phase one contracts do not cover the phase one costs, that sounds like a very difficult financial situation. Another consideration is, FERC approved this based on it being an LNG export facility. And so, if only phase one was completed, FERC would have effectively approved an intrastate pipeline. And I know that's not the intent of the project team. I've never heard them communicate, this not being one complete program that they're focused on. But those are just a couple considerations. There could be benefit in doing it earlier. On that previous slide, it does show that, at least in 2024, they believe phasing it could get that in-state gas flowing 2 to 3 years earlier than otherwise. So just some considerations.
Follow-up, Senator Clayman?
Let's assume that the pushing some of the finance for phase one into later phases that have better economic prospects than phase one, assuming you don't have that shifting it to the later phases to fund. And so phase one essentially has to get funded on its own merits. What's your perspective about whether phase one could get financed on its own merits, at least on what you know today?
What does that have to do with the tax bills that are sitting before them? This is 100% a belief issue that this project is even going to get built. 100%. These people sitting here do not believe that Glenfarne can actually build the project, or they don't want them to build the project, and therefore they just have not, they're like, stick their head in the sand for the last 6 months to a year and don't really care because they don't believe it's going to happen. I don't know what it is, but their job right now is to make a good decision on the bill that's being presented to them by the entity that the state has asked to build the pipeline. And now they're going to I mean, this is it. The legislature is going to second guess whether Glenfarne actually knows what it's talking about and take action. What action are you going to take? You're going to choose to support them, or you're going to choose not to support them? Like, I thought it was like, we're going to support the project that's going to give us a pipeline if they can make it work. If they can't make it work, what skin is it off our back? Like, there's nothing in the capital budget or the operating budget that's costing them, these legislators, anything. They don't have to say no to any other projects right now because Glenfarne is doing the pipeline. They don't have to say no to anything. If Glenfarne doesn't build a project and there isn't a pipeline, these people don't have to say no to any spending because there's no additional revenue coming in. There's no impact. So what is it about Glenfarne trying to build this pipeline that you think you can sit there and second guess whether it's going to get built or not? Why not say, this looks like an interesting project, Glenfarne, how can we help? We modify the taxes. Okay, that's great. You know what happens if Glenfarne fails? These guys can sit back in their chairs and be like, yeah, we really didn't think that was going to work. No skin off our back. Didn't cost us anything other than the money that we've already put into this whole project. So now we were proven right. Glenfarne couldn't do it. Now the state's going to have to go back to owning the project and managing it itself. Like, this is what we wanted in the first place and couldn't do for a decade. So now we're back to square one. That would be where you would take this. One way you could take this if Glenfarne fails. Here, you're trying to find reasons why Glenfarne is going to fail before they even get out the gate. What is the so what here? What do you think you're going to do with all of these questions in this line of thinking? Senator Clayman's asking the question, well, I should need to start at the right instead of the left and look at the end of the project and backwards plan from there. So why don't we apply that logic to this line of questioning? What is it that you're actually going to attempt to do with this line of questioning? At the end of this meeting or the end of this dog and pony show, this effort to show that you're doing your due diligence, what is the thing you're going to do? Is it address the tax bill that's before you? Is it pass the other tax bill that adds more burden to the project, 275? What is it that you're going to do, Senator Clayman? It sounds like you're making an argument for why the thinking man would not support this project because it can't be done. That's what I think. Like, all the company is asking for is for you to shift the tax structure so that they can get going. What is the logical conclusion to the line of questioning that you're asking, Senator Clayman?
I think that financing would need to be based on the amount of gas supply contracts, how firm those contracts are. And so, I would defer to Dan Stickle. I've had an appreciation for the modeling that Mr. Stickle has done, and I think it's been very informative. But, in terms of volumes, we've heard that Donlin may be pursuing or is in discussions relative to a demand of maybe 50 million cubic feet per day. NSTAR's average demand is on the order of 100 million cubic feet per day. So that would be 150. So we're not sure if the $12 to $13 was based on a 500 million cubic feet per day or 3 to 350 or what that was based on. But and we've heard it communicated that phase one may cost $16. I think we heard that in a previous committee, and that would go down to $5 if phase two was completed.
Senator Clayman.
So just to summarize, it would seem that, a pretty high volume would need to be established on phase one for that to be viable on its own.
Senator Kawasaki, no question at this time. Further questions? All right, we'll go on to the slide titled Gas Supply Risks.
Thank you. And this is Jeremy Clark again for the record. So we've understood that the South Central Alaska supply was particularly strained this winter and continues to remain tight for the immediate future. So we've taken a high-level look at the key risks associated with the three primary gas supply options of Cook Inlet production, the phase one pipeline, and the LNG imports. For the Cook Inlet production, the key risk is really the gas availability itself. Many studies have been done over the years highlighting that the production is declining and recent exploration success has been limited. So,
what does the gas supply risks have to do with the taxation of a pipeline? What is this slide communicating to you? Chair Giesel has asked the committee or the committee has asked Chair Giesel, or Giesel just decided on her own to consider these three things. They've asked their consultant to come in and consider these three things. You've got risks for 3 different projects: Cook Inlet production, a phase 1 pipeline, or LNG imports. We're considering the tax rate of a pipeline. So the pipeline the producer of the pipeline, the builder of the construction project manager, whatever, Glenfarne, can get moving. That's what they say they need. Why are we considering the 3 options of what South Central Alaska and the interior, because Cook Inlet production and LNG imports doesn't give the interior gas, not without having to have another solution to get it up there, or the phase 1 pipeline? What is this? What are we getting at here? Like, this doesn't have anything to do with taxation. This is a completely separate conversation that's saying we need to take a look at the risks and the cost benefit analysis of doing Cook Inlet production and compare it against pipeline construction and compare it against doing LNG imports. We need to spend some time thinking about that. Is this really the wisest thing to do? How does the phase 1 pipeline stack up to importing LNG or having Hillcorp go find us, or Hex Fury go find us more gas? That's not the conversation that's before the legislature. The conversation before the legislature is, what is the tax rate that you want on the current project? You've got a private company waiting for your direction. What is this about? This is, you don't believe there's a pipeline going to be built, or you don't want one built.
Again, the supply is the key risk from the Cook Inlet production option. For the pipeline, it's obviously a high capital investment and has more uncertainty in the schedule for meeting the needs, the in-state needs. So it's really the timing and the project costs represent the key risk there. And there's, as we near FID, that's a big milestone for the project, but there's also a large gap between getting to FID and getting to COD as well. And then on the LNG import option, it offers lower capital costs than the pipeline, but then you add the increased exposure to the market price risk for the gas. Any questions on this slide here?
Senator Myers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, gentlemen, this slide to me kind of illustrates, I think, why phase 1 is viable. Let me just kind of run through my thinking here, and you please tell me where I get anything wrong. So what I see is that the change in the Cook Inlet production, the lack of production there is really the key that has made things viable, because with a lack of gas, you either have to build a pipeline or you have to do imports. Those are your effective alternatives. The price of the imports, the price of the
Senator Myers is a friend of mine, and I trust his thinking. But what does the viability have anything to do with what is sitting before you right now? The viability question is not your determination. The viability question is Glenfarne's. They're the ones that are going to decide yes or no as to whether the pipeline is going to be built. Your opinion on the matter and the time that you're wasting here has no impact on whether Glenfarne is going to decide to build this pipeline or not, unless you don't act on the pipeline taxation question. So how does the feasibility of this project influence your decision for a modification to the tax? If you get a warm fuzzy that this is feasible, then you're going to support a modification to the tax. Or if you come away thinking, oh, you know what, Glenfarne's just bit off more than they can chew, this isn't feasible. My opinion and my consultant's opinion is that this isn't feasible, so we're not going to make the modifications. What is the point of having the conversation about the feasibility? You've got no concern over that. That is all 100% Glenfarne right now.
The imports effectively puts a cost ceiling on phase one. So as long as phase one can reliably get completed to make the gas cheaper than the imports, then it's viable. The difference from a consumer perspective with phase one versus imports is phase one provides effectively a ceiling on how high your gas price can go. It might be high right now, but it's got the possibility of coming down. As you bring on more volume, you mentioned Donlin in particular has come out, but might be other possibilities as well. Whether we talk the Agrium plant or something like that. But then the imports, on the other hand, if we make the decision to just rely on imports instead, rather than providing a price ceiling, now you've provided a price floor. So that might be slightly better right now than phase one, but because, as you point out, we don't have any control over the gas supply cost, and we've just seen in the world markets what can happen there, that's got nowhere to go but up effectively. So is that a proper analysis of the situation of where we could stand if phase one is as far as we get?
Senator Myers, this is Jeremy Clark on the response. That I think was a very fair assessment. I would just add that the pipeline does have a high degree of schedule risk. So the timing of when that pipeline will actually be completed and the gas flowing is very uncertain. So I think is just one point that I would highlight.
Okay.
Follow up, Senator Myers?
Yeah, just to say, to offset that risk in terms of gas supply for South Central, we've got two possibilities of import projects that we're talking about. One would be the very large one that Glenfarne and NSTAR are getting together on, and the other being the much smaller one that Harvest is putting together from the old Conoco or Phillips, or one of the two of them. The old Phillips.
Harvest and Chugach Electric. I know Chugach Electric is not a buyer or not a partner, but they're the ones that are pushing or working with Harvest for that LNG import facility.
Phillips export terminal from the 60s, which my understanding is on the second one, it's much smaller, but it can be completed much faster. And so that kind of while we still have the uncertainty as to when the pipe is going to be done, that at least removes some of the uncertainty for the gas supply in the short term for South Central. Is that accurate?
So given that, what is the correct taxation for this pipeline project?
Senator Myers, yes, that is our understanding as well.
Okay, thank you.
This is Joe Miller. We just say initially when we came onto this project, I didn't understand the pursuit of both Alaska LNG and the LNG importing. And I've since developed an appreciation for the potential pursuit of both. The LNG importing options being lower risk in terms of getting those completed in a timely fashion versus the LNG export facility. And I have an appreciation for what I'll call the Glenfarne LNG project in it being able to provide short-term relief, and then much of that equipment being able to be used for the LNG export project as well. And so we know that gas supply is tight in Alaska. You're coming through an extremely tight winter, and we've heard testimony and read reports showing the next few years are tight. And so we have an appreciation for how LNG importing and the Alaska LNG project could work together.
Very good. We have about 20 minutes left. I think we're ready to move to the title slide, Trans-Alaska Pipeline System.
Thank you. This is Jeremy Clark for the record. So As we noted on the key gas supply risks for the pipeline, included the capital cost of the pipeline and the overall execution uncertainty. We now look at the challenges and resulting cost overruns on the TAPS project. So the TAPS project, while constructed back in the mid-1970s, faced many of the challenges that still exist for the Alaska project today, varying groundwater, underground conditions, the permafrost, and lower than planned productivity. These were all site-specific related challenges that are very applicable to the Alaska LNG project. The construction cost overruns that resulted generally related to underestimating costs, required scopes not in the initial estimate, inadequate contingency to address the risks, and no escalation in the estimate, while they also faced a 4-year delay to the start of construction. So right off the bat, they were facing some significant cost pressures there. And this highlights the importance of having thorough estimating processes, including the independent reviews to validate the estimate. It also raises the importance of having robust risk assessments to inform how much contingency is included in the estimate, as well as how much float to have within the project schedule. Any questions on this slide?
So, because there remains risk, similar risk that the builders of TAPS had to this pipeline project, are we to take away from this conversation that because there exists risk here and it's higher risk than building an import facility, that we would rather take action on our tax policy to force us to go to the lower risk model because we don't want to take the higher risk? Is that how this applies to our decision about taxation? What is the point here? Yes, there are risks. No one's ever said there aren't going to be risks. That's what Glenfarne is going to manage. And they need to get going. They need your help to get going. Unless you're thinking that Glenfarne doesn't know what they're doing and you don't want them to build the pipeline. In which case, you ought to come right out and just say that. Save all Alaskans the heartache of thinking that we've got something going forward and the legislature is saying we're acting in your best interest here. Glenfarne is not capable, in our estimation here, Glenfarne is not capable of doing this. Look at all of the risk that exists. We don't think Glenfarne can make this happen. Even if we give them what they want with regard to taxation, and even if we only limit ourselves to $800 million a year in tax benefit from this, even if we do all that, there's just so much risk for this project. We don't think that Glenfarne needs to continue on this. And we'd rather go with the less risky importation of LNG. That is your option right now. What is the point of having this conversation other than that?
I see no questions. So moving to the slide that says lessons learned.
Yeah, so the GAO conducted a study of the TAPS project and identified several lessons learned that are particularly relevant to nearly all mega projects. And they also specifically included a note that the experience gained from the TAPS should be applied to projects like the Alaska LNG project. These lessons learned include incorporating as much project-specific data as feasible while having awareness of existing uncertainties and other risks. It also ties government approvals and expenditures to detailed planning and ongoing government audits. On the planning for the TAPS, the issue was really on the cost control systems itself. Again, this was back in the 1970s, so the project management systems have come a long way since then. I doubt that that would continue to be a risk. It was more the number of parties involved in the project and consolidating all that data under one system. But again, IT systems are well capable to handle that today. On the future project expenditures should have an ongoing government audit note. That really related to informing the degree of costs that were recoverable through tariffs and understanding the resulting cost impact to customers. And concerning the note of viewing the cost estimates with skepticism, as we've discussed, there's a multitude of factors that can influence the estimate accuracy. One factor relevant in particular to mega and giga projects is the multi-year development efforts ahead of multi-year execution. So even just general market conditions changing over those periods, which is often the case, can have large impacts on the ultimate cost of the project, not to mention all the other project-specific risks. So any questions on this slide here?
Yes, Senator Myers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So regarding your last bullet there about government audit to protect the public's interest, we did have some testimony here a couple of days ago about how the gas contracts between Glenfarne and NSTAR would have to be approved by the RCA, likely before even construction even started. And so that any potential cost overruns most likely would not be able to be easily passed from Glenfarne onto the end consumer. Do you believe that that is an adequate protection?
This is Joe Miller. First of all, we were very glad to hear that from Glenfarne, that capital cost overruns would not be passed on to customers. That was, I would say, our largest concern coming into this. And so that just needs to be memorialized in some fashion, either in the contract between NSTAR and the project, or through the RCA process, or through legislation. But it needs to be memorialized in some fashion. But it certainly reduces risk for in-state customers.
Follow up, Senator Myers.
No, thank you.
Senator Kosaki.
Yeah, thanks. I asked the question earlier about how litigation had stopped one of the other projects down south, and I'm curious because TAPS was done just after the NEPA was done. So are there, I mean, we're kind of in a different era. It seems like things get litigated a lot, especially in Alaska. And so I'm just curious if we should discount for those types of things to happen past TAPS.
What types of things again?
Any sort of, through the chair, any sort of litigation that might occur, because during TAPS, I don't know if there was a lot of litigation, to tell you the truth, but it seemed like there's more now than there was 30 years ago or 40 years ago.
Certainly. I'm not sure I have a sense of that. I know there was a tremendous focus on fighting the pipelines that were being developed to get gas out of that northern Appalachian region. The gas that is being produced in that region is very cheap in terms of the commodity. There's just difficulty in getting it out of there. And so, one change that has occurred has been, instead of bringing lawsuits against producers and, against each wellhead, so to speak, they've found it to be more effective and efficient to fight the pipelines that are getting high volumes of gas out of that region. And so, but I don't have a sense of what the opposition and litigation might be on this type of project.
Spot on, Craig. Thanks.
Senator Clayman.
I want to follow up on your answer to Senator Myers' questions, specific to there's an assurance that the Alaska consumers won't be asked to pay cost overruns from phase one. And let's assume that that's true, that the consumer will not be asked to pay for the cost overruns. From the business standpoint, doesn't that actually put greater pressure on Glenfarne in terms of what it's doing if it doesn't have an avenue to collect the cost overruns or some means to get those paid? Doesn't that put greater pressure on Glenfarne as they go forward if they get to a point at which they realize it isn't working, costs are getting high? Does it create a greater likelihood that they stop construction even sooner? They get started a year in, they suddenly realize costs are going way up. There's no way to collect those costs, and then they say, well, this project's dead.
Yes, certainly provides greater risk. And so that increased risk would go into negotiations with potential financing counterparties.
Which is one of the reasons why they've brought Senate Bill 280 to you, to reduce the risk of litigation with regard to the state's assessment of property valuation.
Likely ultimately
wouldn't that
I was just going to say likely would ultimately show up in a risk premium in terms of, expected return.
Again, this is the second consultant that has said that if risk is going up, you're going to pay a premium for it, which means the cost of your gas goes up. So you've got sitting before you, before this committee, two bills, 275, which is going to add cost to the project through adding taxes, or you've got Senate Bill 280 that's going to reorder the taxes and reduce the tax burden. Which one of those two bills reduces the cost of gas to you, the consumer? Senate Bill 280 is the only one that does that. It's the only line that results in the lowest possible cost of gas, all of the things being considered equal. This conversation that this legislature wants to have that says, well, we've got to have more revenue. $280 or $800 million a year is not enough. We need to have more. How much profit is Glenfarne going to actually make? Like, is that really fair? Like, we need to see what their actual profit's going to make, because we want to be making more money. And every dollar, every additional tax that you add adds cost to the tax that the taxpayer, the ratepayer, us that would be benefiting from the gas, it just increases the cost of that gas. If they cared about low-cost gas, they would be approaching this in a completely different conversation that says, how do we produce gas to Alaskans at the lowest possible rate? That is what our people need long-term. Our 20-somethings that are just starting out in life and our elderly that are on fixed incomes, they really need to have low-cost gas. Our businesses that we want to have thriving in our communities, they need to have low-cost gas. What can we do to get low-cost gas? All of these questions, whole line of thinking. The two bills that are sitting before them, which of these gets us low-cost gas? What tax regime gets us low-cost gas? Not how much can we make as a state.
So what we'd potentially see is that the people that would be lending money for the project might very well raise the interest rate significantly because they see a greater risk, because there's less avenues to cover additional costs that may arise in the course of the project.
Yeah, I would say all else equal, greater perceived risk would come with a greater expected return.
Senator Myers.
And a greater cost for the project.
To follow up on Senator Clayman's line of thought there, it sounds to me like effectively what you're saying is, well, having the gas contracts and everything finalized early on could potentially raise the financing costs some. I don't want to say a literal or a lot. I'll leave that up to your judgment, but it could potentially raise the financing costs some. It also gives us a greater assurance that once the project gets started, it's going to get completed too. Is that accurate?
Could you restate that question? To make sure I understood that.
Yeah.
Myers.
Yeah, thank you. So what I'm trying to say is going off of what Senator Clements was asking about in your response to it, it sounds like while greater assurance that the cost cannot be passed on to the consumer because of RCA regulation could potentially raise the financing costs to some extent, it also gives us greater assurance that if the project goes to FID and gets approved and the construction commences, it much less lowers the risk of having massive cost overruns and lowers the risk of the project not being completed in the manner of the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, because the contracts have already been finalized, and so they already know ahead of time that they have to have all of this stuff accounted for before they get started. Is that accurate?
I think that's fair. This is Joe Miller. I think that's fair that, not having a regulatory situation where cost overruns can be passed on to customers puts more motivation on the project team to get it accomplished in the time frame and on the schedule originally envisioned.
Thank you. Senator Clayman, I will point out we do have a hard stop at 11 with a floor session. Senator Clayman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess my query, if you're locked in on gas price, if you've got contracts in place at a certain price that justifies the project going forward and you have no means to go to the consumer to cover cost increases, on the one hand, that gives an incentive to get it done on time and under budget or on budget. But the flip side is that if you're already fixed in your gas contract prices, you have almost no room to move if you do have extra expenses, and that doesn't necessarily make it more likely. It just means if you have the extra expenses, there's no place for the company to go because you're locked in your gas price and you can't go to consumers to pick up the difference. Am I missing something?
This is Joe Miller. I would say it just has everything to do with the assumptions in the economic modeling and how those various contracts are structured and their thoughts on the future market value of exported LNG.
All right, we'll move on to cost control strategies now.
Thank you. This is Jeremy Clark again for the record. So at the highest level, the project owner, the main contractors, and the end users, collectively each have exposure to the project cost overruns. Between the owner and contractors, the construction contracts provide the mechanism for which cost overruns are allocated. And between the owner and end user, tolling and sales agreements similarly provide the mechanism for which cost overruns are allocated. Ideally, the contracting approach should support the strategic vision of the project's owners while providing alignment amongst the contract parties and allowing adaptation to complexities and uncertainties. And the better aligned the stakeholders and partners are, the more prepared they will be to address and mitigate risks. Practices for aligning stakeholders and partners include early engagement of key stakeholders, shared governance, collaboration, shared financial incentives, risks and rewards, and a no-blame culture of open communication amongst the key stakeholders that works towards supporting common goals and objectives.
Who is this for?
Any questions here on this slide?
What's the legislature going to do with this? Who's controlling costs? Is this the legislature going to control costs through some sort of legislation? Or is this the legislature going to speak to Glenfarne and say, hey, it's really important. We now know how to control costs. We know what you need to do. We need to be a partner in this, and we're going to oversee you in controlling costs. Like the legislature knows what it would be doing to help control costs. Like this is on Glenfarne. They're going to control costs, or they're going to not be able to control costs, and the project will get more expensive. I mean, what is the point of having this line of cost questioning with regard to the two bills you have sitting before you?
Any questions? I see none. And that looks like your last slide. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Do you have any closing comments?
Okay. No, they don't. Okay. I've made my opinions here through this meeting. Yeah, I think Senator Myers is doing a really good job. It's tough because you've got a one-track mind on those 3 seats that are sitting at the head of that table, and I think all they want to do is increase the taxation of this program, and they don't care whether the pipeline gets built. I think that's what they want to do. Craig says he's going to call Stephen's office tomorrow and ask him if he really wants his legacy to be the Senate president who failed providing affordable energy to Alaskans. Not a bad question. I would recommend to him that he exert influence over Senate resources and determine whether we want to have a project or not. And if so, do you want Alaskans to have the lowest possible gas or not? And if so, what can you do to make that happen? Checking through the comments here, make sure I didn't miss any questions. Craig, you go soak your head. Not sure how one goes about doing that unless you're opening a bottle of some kind. I don't know exactly what that means, but I hope you have a good time. Let's see. My understanding, the pipeline can be built down to Fairbanks in 36 months. I don't remember the timeline down to Fairbanks. All I was cared about was when can it get to Nikiski? I'm kidding. I don't know how long it would take to get to Fairbanks. I know that if the project never gets off the ground, it does never come to Fairbanks. So everybody in Fairbanks ought to be calling Kawasaki and saying, hey, guy, snap out of it. What are you going to do to ensure a pipeline gets built? If you've got a company there in the private sector is willing to assume the risk, and it's not going to cost the state any more money, which it's not. And frankly, the state's not going to, it doesn't have any money to chip in, even if it could. You got 25% ownership through AGDC of 8-star, but the state's not going to exercise that. Where are you going to come up with 25% of a project that's this big? The legislature's not got that money sitting around. They're not going to spend any money on this. You got to decide whether you're going to hitch your wagon to the Glenfarne horse and hope that Glenfarne knows what they're doing, or you're going to go with a different project. And right now, the only thing you've got is importing LNG, and that is guaranteed to give you higher cost gas. So stop screwing around and give Glenfarne the chance that they need. Yeah, thanks. I appreciate your support there, Craig, but I also have the benefit of not sitting there in real time. I can got no pressure. Like I'm looking around, there's no pressure here. Well, I guess the camera and all of you, but I don't feel the pressure that they feel. Dean says, thanks, Dean. Good to see you on Facebook. This committee is acting as if they have never seen the proposal to build, and it is up to them to say yes or no. Right. Like they're looking at this through the lens of, is this wise or is this a feasible project? Which that question's already been answered or will be answered at FID. And they can answer that question and influence, just like you said, by saying no to a tax break that either kills the project or increases the cost of gas to you and I. It is a possibility that if Glenfarne doesn't get their way with Senate Bill 280, that they say, okay, fine, we'll just go seek other financing. And that other financing will be more expensive and the cost of gas will have to go up. And if we can get that, if the buyers and the sellers are okay with that, then we'll move the project along, and that means. And so the legislature, all they do is shift the cost to you. They get greater taxes at the legislature because they implemented that policy. The cost of gas is higher to you, and it's just a quiet taxation of you. You're just paying taxes through your higher cost of gas to the legislature. That's what is potential to happen. What in an earlier portion of this meeting, Senator Giesel was asking about what happened down in Texas, where there was a school district or some municipality or some entity, some jurisdiction said no to a property tax abatement. And Glenfarne went ahead and built the pipeline anyway. Okay. If they're going to have to pay higher taxes, then they're passing that cost on to the consumer, to the customer. That means you and I pay higher cost in gas. If the legislature is okay with you paying higher cost in gas, if they get their royalties or their additional taxation, what do you think the odds are they go ahead and do that? The Glenfarne comes in and says, you know what? It doesn't really matter. Whatever you decide, we think we can build the project. And these legislators say, oh, great. We're going to keep the taxes at 20 mils. Well, you who are listening to this show will know that there was an alternative for cheaper gas. And the legislature said, no, we don't want cheaper gas. We want higher taxation. We want more revenue to the state through this mechanism. So you're going to pay higher gas. We're going to get more revenue. That's a tax on you and I because we had an alternative. So even if it doesn't kill the project, it means you end up with higher cost gas. Rick, these people are in charge of seeing whether the project moves forward if the tax issue kills the project. These are the ones right here. I would say that there's others that are going to, there's a larger majority at play here. There's the rest of the Senate and there's the entire House that would have a say in this because this is Senate Bill 280. It hasn't passed through the House yet. This is why waiting 6 weeks and having a whole bunch of conversations on this and dragging it out and then sending it over to the House. And oh my God, go look at the membership of the House resources because this is going to have to go to House resources. Go look at the makeup of that committee. We're going to have to do this all over again. Yeah, Fairbanks has got, you're just waiting for gas, right? You've been putting pipelines in. I'm telling you, you people in Fairbanks ought to be getting a hold of Kawasaki and putting him on a tight leash. Dean, thanks for the correction. We aren't back at square one if the permitting expires and we got to go all the way back to the beginning and get new permits. Yeah, that's worse than square one. Totally get it. Why was Rob so quiet? I don't know. Call and ask Rob. It is after you go through a number of committee meetings where all you're doing is fighting. There is incredible pressure to not do that because it is a pain in the butt to just be constantly at each other's throat. I get it that's what you're expected to do because that's your representative. That's your job to speak and to advocate. It gets old after a while. So I understand why you got to pick your battles. Let's just put it that way. I am not overseeing this committee because the voters did not choose to send me down. That's on them. They get what they get. I wouldn't have this show and I wouldn't be able to spend this time with all of you if they had sent me to the Senate. So there's a benefit for me. I get to not have to wear a tie every day. I'm making fun of it. I would love to be there and having the conversations because I think I could probably, I would add some value to the conversations. I've heard this phased approach concept as being smart from more than one person. And honestly, it is evidence of outside of the box thinking, where someone says, hey, we've got this mega project and there's all these components. Why don't we reorder them just a little bit? And what happens when we do that? Is there a way that we can do this in sequence that makes the project, more feasible and more cost effective, and it makes it easier to do? That's great thinking. It's evidence of great thinking, in my opinion. It is what you would not expect if the government were running the program. You would not get that kind of thinking. It's innovative. Nothing from this government is going to be defined as innovative. Never. So this is not exactly how it works. The Senate president could influence Giesel, but she's the committee chair. She gets to do what she wants in her committee. Unless they remove her as committee chair, she gets to focus on whatever she wants to focus on. And therein lies the problem. The way to solve this is if the body itself, if there's a majority of senators who say Giesel is off in la la land, they can pull the bill out of committee. From the floor, they can issue a vote, make a motion, vote on it, and remove the bill from the committee. And it just moves to the next committee, which is probably finance, I would guess. I don't know. I haven't checked on it. It's probably a good answer. Where is this going for time-wise? Let me just pull this up real quick, and I'll tell you really quick where it's going next. Yep, then finance. So it goes to finance, and then it goes to the House. And if they're smart, they just send it to finance. Don't even give resources a chance at it. Resources is going to throw a big fit. But you got two co-chairs over there. I don't know what they're doing either. So, yeah, you should send it right to finance, House Finance, and let them deal with this. But Senate Finance, Speaker of the House, they can provide some influence behind the scenes, but they can't control what's going on inside the committee. That's the purview of the committee chair per the rules. They get to control the agenda. I think Craig. Craig's even with us, right? Craig said he was going to go. Who was this? Said they were going to go. I don't know. Anyway. Is it possible to call the testifiers and apologize? That's funny. Yeah, we know that they hired you as our consultants, and on behalf of the people, we'd like to apologize that we sent those representatives to have to deal with. You have to deal with. That's funny. Just send them a note. Figure out where Pegasus's headquarters is, and send them a card. Send them a thing of flowers with a note that says we're sorry. Signed Alaskans. That's funny. If you got money to waste, I guess a card's only whatever cost of the card and a stamp. That would be funny. You'd never get to see the result though, right? You just have to know that did the right thing. Anyway. Okay. Well, that's it. I think I've reviewed these. Losing shower. So there's some more that came in. Losing shower from the Senate was huge. Yeah. But you know what? This is the thing that we should all keep in mind, is that the institutions that we have for self-government have to be bigger than any one person. And I know that's hard to say when you've got somebody that's so valuable, but that's the way it is. And that is why there needs to be people waiting in the wings that are on the bench, right? That are involved. They're staying aware. They're honing their skills. They're learning how to talk. They're learning about what's going on in the legislature. They're improving themselves and being ready, right? Because as soon as that guy leaves, somebody else is going to have to fill him. And if we want the system to continue, we have to be building that bench. We can't just trust that people are going to be there forever. Like that's out west. They did that. That's Senator Hoffman. He's been there for, I don't know, 40 years or something like that. Conservatives are not going to spend that much time in the legislature. We're like, I'm doing this for a period of time and then I'm out. Somebody else is going to have to come in and do this. I want to get as far away from government as possible. That's the conservative limited government approach. We got to have people on the bench to come in and fill in after people like Shower. Rick, are you back on this? With the people in the state of Alaska who want a pipeline, seriously apologize for their actions of our legislature. Thank you. You have a good day. Yeah. Yep, but if Shower gets elected, then he'll be in a good position to influence election integrity. So that'll be good. Okay. All right. If you're not growing, you're dying. Yeah. Yeah. You know what? I just read, there was an article. Oh, I forget where. It's probably the Alaska story. Something about the economy. And we've lost more than what we think we lost. Anyway, I shouldn't bring it up. Maybe when we're done with this conversation on LNG pipeline, we'll go down that road and look at what's happened to our economy. Because it's true. If you're in the business of hiring, especially in the oil and gas industry, you will know, or in construction, you'll know. Like, tradespeople are in high demand right now because there is not a very deep bench in that. Like, we've lost a lot of capacity to build things in this state. And that's to our detriment. That just shows how weak the economy has gotten. And even if you've got a pipeline coming, I mean, yes, it'll bring some Alaska people up to Alaska, but you're going to have a lot of subject matter expertise and employees coming from out of state because we just do not have the capacity in Alaska to support it. We don't. It'll take a while to build that up. Anyway, who is the senator that took Shelley's place? That is Representative Tilton, is now Senator Tilton. And Representative Rauscher took over Senator Shower's seat. Hey, Bill, thanks for joining us. Checking in, Representative Elam. Problem is that everyone is focused on how this funds government, not on how it builds our private sector economy. Thanks, Bill. If there's testimony opportunity, go give your testimony. That's exactly what we've been trying to highlight here. The whole point of the meetings that we have seen thus far in Senate Resources has nothing to do. There's nothing to recognize that the senators think about the private economy when they're talking about the pipeline. There's nothing that evidence doesn't exist. They're 100% thinking about how much money they can get for state government. Yeah. All right. Every time I think I'm going to be able to keep a meeting short, I look up and it's past 2 hours. Where does the time go? Imagine if I had commercials to have to deal with. My goodness, I would really have to be either disciplined or we'd be on like a 2.5 to 3 hour show. Who's going to sit around for a 3 hour show? Thank you all for participating this long for a 2 hour show. I hope it was useful. I hope you learned something. And I know I have, and I enjoy answering questions and providing insight. So that's good. If you want to support the program, please go to OversightLIVE.com and click on the support link and help me continue doing this. It's greatly appreciated. Okay, tomorrow's Friday. Not sure what meetings are scheduled. Sometimes some meetings don't happen. Let me see if I can look really quick. Committees, standing committees, Senate resources. Just curious what they've got scheduled for tomorrow. While I'm here, 17th is scheduled. Okay, so it doesn't have any documents up yet, so I don't know what they're going to be talking about, but they are scheduled for, I'm sorry. They do have noticed. They have Senate Bill 280 noticed, Senate Bill 208 agricultural land leases, Senate Bill 192 evacuation designation levels, Senate Bill 174 invasive species management. So it is a possibility that Senate Resources is going to do something other than Senate Bill 280 tomorrow, and that's what's been noticed for tomorrow. So we'll see. Maybe there's something else that we need to chat about. We'll keep our eye on the conversation here in Senate Resources and what's going on elsewhere, and figure out what we're going to talk about tomorrow. If you have some requests, you want to see something or talk about something, highlight something, send me an email, producer@oversightlive.com, and I'll do my best to see if I can't make that happen. So, Christopher, need to get some sponsors to put some money in my pocket. Yeah, working on that. Thanks. You guys have a great evening, great Thursday evening. Don't let that second or third winter that we've had now, I'm ready for winter to be over, get you down. It's all temporary. Summer will be here before you know it. Have a good night. We'll see you tomorrow.